The sun was shining brightly over the historic city square, bathing everything in warm golden light. The air buzzed with energy as tourists from all over the world wandered around, cameras in hand, eager to capture memories of their visit. In the center of it all stood a towering monument, its intricate carvings and statues telling stories of centuries past. People gathered around it, pointing at details, reading plaques, and posing for pictures. Nearby, a guardsman named Marcus stood perfectly still, his presence commanding yet serene. He wore the traditional ceremonial uniform, spotless boots polished to a mirror shine, a crisp red coat adorned with gleaming buttons, and most strikingly, a tall bearskin hat that added an air of authority to his figure. To many passers-by, he seemed like part of the scenery, almost statue-like in his stillness. But those who knew better understood that beneath his calm exterior lay years of discipline and training. Marcus had been posted here countless times before, but today felt different. Perhaps it was the unusually large crowd, or the excited chatter filling the air. Whatever it was, something about the atmosphere made him more alert than usual. His eyes scanned the area methodically, taking note of every movement without ever breaking his rigid posture. Among the throng of visitors was Alex, a young tourist with a knack for mischief. Unlike most people who came to admire the monument, Alex wasn't there to soak in history or take thoughtful photographs. Instead, they were drawn to the spectacle, the lively chaos of so many cultures converging in one place. With a group of friends tagging along, Alex's mind raced with ideas for pranks to pull, stunts that would make them stand out in the crowd. As they walked closer to Marcus, Alex's gaze locked onto the towering guardsman. There was something fascinating, and maybe even intimidating, about how utterly immovable Marcus appeared. It sparked an idea in Alex's head. What if they could disrupt that perfect stillness? What if they did something bold enough to shake up this picture of order and tradition? At first, Alex dismissed the thought as ridiculous. After all, messing with someone on duty wasn't exactly smart or respectful. But the more they watched Marcus, the stronger the urge became. Their friends noticed too, nudging each other and whispering encouragements. "Go ahead," one said with a grin. "Do it," another chimed in. Emboldened by their support, and perhaps by the thrill of being surrounded by strangers who didn't know them, Alex decided to go through with it. They approached Marcus casually, pretending to be just another curious tourist. Alex hovered nearby, snapping a few photos while secretly sizing up their target. The guardsmen didn't flinch, not even when Alex leaned in close under the pretense of getting a better angle. Every second felt like an eternity, but Alex's heart pounded with excitement. This was it, the moment they'd been building up to. While everyone else focused on the monument or chatted amongst themselves, no one noticed Alex's true intentions. They waited until the timing felt just right, then struck. With lightning-fast reflexes, Alex reached out and grabbed the heavy bearskin hat straight off Marcus's head. Before anyone could react, Alex bolted into the crowd, clutching their prize tightly. Gasps rippled through the square as people realized what had happened. Some stared in disbelief, others laughed nervously, and a few muttered disapproving comments. Meanwhile, Marcus blinked once, his expression unreadable. Though his body remained rooted to the spot, he couldn't abandon his post after all. His jaw tightened ever so slightly. For now, he stayed silent, letting the chaos unfold around him. As Alex sprinted through the crowd, clutching the stolen bearskin hat, a wave of exhilaration surged through their body. The weight of the hat was heavier than they'd expected, but that only added to the thrill. It felt like holding a trophy, proof of their audacity. People turned their heads in shock as Alex darted past them, laughing loudly and waving the hat high above their head. "Look at me," Alex shouted, half-jokingly, as if daring anyone to stop them. The reaction from the crowd was immediate and varied. Some tourists froze mid-step, mouths agape, unsure whether to laugh or scold. A family with young children looked on in confusion, the parents whispering urgently to each other about how inappropriate the act was. Nearby, a group of teenagers giggled nervously, torn between admiration for Alex's boldness and discomfort over the blatant disrespect. One older man shook his head disapprovingly, muttering something under his breath about kids these days. Meanwhile, Marcus remained rooted to his spot, his face an unreadable mask. Though his outward demeanor didn't change, inside, his thoughts raced. He had trained for years to maintain composure in situations exactly like this, but nothing could have prepared him for the absurdity of having his hat snatched right off his head. His pride stung, not because of the theft itself, but because of what it represented, a challenge to the dignity and tradition he stood for. Alex reveled in the attention, basking in the chaos they had created. They zigzagged through the square, dodging strollers, benches, and bewildered pedestrians. Every few steps, they paused dramatically to pose with the hat, pulling silly faces or pretending to tip it like a performer on stage. Their friends trailed behind, torn between cheering Alex on and worrying about the consequences. "You're insane," one of them called out, trying to suppress a laugh. Another friend filmed the entire scene on their phone, already imagining the viral potential of the footage. But not everyone found the stunt amusing. A woman nearby stepped forward, her arms crossed firmly over her chest. "That's enough," she said sternly, glaring at Alex. "Give it back. It's not yours." Her voice cut through the noise, momentarily silencing the murmurs around her. For a brief second, Alex hesitated, meeting the woman's gaze. But then, shrugging off her words, they resumed running, fueled by adrenaline and the growing audience. Back at his post, Marcus's eyes followed Alex's movements carefully, though he gave no outward sign of emotion. He couldn't chase after the thief, not without abandoning his position, but he knew help would arrive soon. His commanding officer, Captain Hayes, wouldn't stand idly by while someone mocked the uniform and disrupted the peace of the square. Sure enough, within moments, word of the incident reached Hayes, who quickly dispatched 2 nearby guardsmen to assist. James and Oliver, both seasoned members of the unit, sprang into action without hesitation. They moved swiftly through the crowd, their polished boots clicking against the cobblestones. Unlike Alex, who weaved erratically to avoid capture, James and Oliver moved with precision, scanning the area for any sign of the fleeing figure. Tourists parted instinctively as the 2 guardsmen approached, sensing the seriousness of the situation. Seeing the reinforcements closing in, Alex's confidence began to waver slightly. They glanced over their shoulder, realizing the gap between themselves and the guardsman was shrinking rapidly. Still, they refused to slow down, clutching the hat tighter as they pushed forward. "Come on, you can't catch me," Alex taunted, their voice tinged with nervous laughter. But deep down, doubt started creeping in. Had they gone too far this time? The chase continued, drawing more eyes and sparking louder reactions from the crowd. Some shouted encouragement to the guardsmen, urging them to catch the thief. Others simply watched in stunned silence, captivated by the unfolding drama. The once peaceful square now buzzed with tension, the air thick with anticipation. Everyone wanted to know, would Alex get away with their prank, or would justice prevail? For Alex, the thrill of the moment clashed with the growing realization that they might not escape unscathed. Each step became heavier, the weight of the hat, and the consequences of their actions, pressing down on them. Despite their bravado, they couldn't ignore the fact that they were quickly running out of options. And yet, they kept moving, driven by a mix of fear, excitement, and sheer stubbornness. The story of the tourist who grabbed a guardsman's hat became more than just a fleeting moment of chaos. It turned into a lasting tale that people recounted for years to come. Parents visiting the square would point to the guardsmen and whisper to their children, "See those hats? Once, someone thought it'd be funny to steal one, but let me tell you what happened." The anecdote served as both entertainment and a subtle lesson about respecting boundaries. It was the kind of story that got embellished over time, with each retelling adding new details, Some claimed Alex had been chased through 10 blocks instead of 2, while others insisted the guardsman performed an elaborate takedown worthy of an action movie. Regardless of how exaggerated the accounts became, the core message remained the same: actions have consequences. For Marcus, life settled back into its predictable rhythm. Each day, he stood at his post, embodying the discipline and dignity expected of him. Though strangers occasionally approached him to ask if he was the guardsman from that hat story, he handled their curiosity with grace, offering polite smiles and brief responses before returning to his duties. To him, the incident wasn't something to dwell on. It was simply another challenge overcome. Yet deep down, he carried a renewed sense of pride in his role. Knowing that his composure during such a bizarre event had inspired admiration reinforced his belief in the importance of staying steadfast, no matter the circumstances. James and Oliver also found themselves reflecting on the experience. They joked about it sometimes when off duty, recalling the absurdity of chasing someone through a crowded square over a stolen hat. But beneath the humor lay a deeper appreciation for their teamwork and the trust they shared. Their ability to act quickly and decisively without losing control demonstrated exactly why they were chosen for this prestigious position. For them, the incident underscored the value of preparation. Not every day involved dramatic pursuits, but when the unexpected happened, they were ready. As for Alex, the lessons learned lingered long after the initial embarrassment faded. Over time, they came to view the incident not as a personal failure, but as a turning point, a moment that forced them to confront the impact of their actions. While they never returned to the square, they often thought about Marcus and the other guardsmen, imagining the quiet strength it took to remain composed under pressure. This newfound perspective influenced their behavior in small ways. They started paying closer attention to cultural norms when traveling, asking questions instead of assuming, and treating traditions with the reverence they deserved. It wasn't a drastic transformation, but it was meaningful nonetheless. Back in the square, life continued as usual. Tourists snapped photos, vendors sold souvenirs, and pigeons fluttered around the feet of visitors. The monument stood tall and unchanging, a silent witness to the ebb and flow of human activity. Guardsmen rotated shifts, standing watchful and proud, their presence a constant reminder of order amidst the bustle. Occasionally, someone would mention the hat-grabbing incident to Captain Hayes, expecting outrage or frustration. Instead, he responded with calm wisdom. Every generation needs reminders of respect and accountability. If one person learns from this, then it's worth it. Social media kept the memory alive too, with memes and videos resurfacing periodically. Some depicted Alex as a bumbling prankster, while others portrayed the guardsmen as stoic heroes. These digital echoes ensured the story reached new audiences, ensuring its place in modern folklore. For better or worse, Alex became synonymous with the phrase, "Don't mess with tradition," serving as a cautionary figure for anyone tempted to test the limits of propriety. Ultimately, the incident left an indelible mark on everyone involved, and even those who only heard about it secondhand. It reminded people that traditions exist for a reason, carrying weight and meaning beyond what meets the eye. It showed that even in moments of disruption, there is always an opportunity to learn, grow, and move forward. And perhaps most importantly, it proved that respect isn't given lightly. It must be earned, cherished, and upheld. Years later, when tourists visited the square, they might still hear whispers of the infamous hat thief. Some laughed at the audacity of it all, while others shook their heads in disbelief. But whether told with amusement or disapproval, the story carried a universal truth. Sometimes, the universe has a way of delivering justice when we least expect it. And sometimes, that justice comes wrapped in a bearskin hat. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the historic square, the initial chaos of the day slowly gave way to a quieter, more reflective atmosphere. Marcus stood tall once again at his post, the familiar weight of his bearskin hat resting securely on his head. Though it bore a few scuffs and scratches from its brief journey through the hands of Alex, it remained intact, a testament to its resilience and craftsmanship. To anyone watching, Marcus appeared as stoic and composed as ever, but inside, he couldn't help but replay the events of the day in his mind. The stolen hat, the chase, the crowd's reactions, it all felt surreal now, like something out of a story rather than real life. Marcus wasn't angry anymore. Instead, he felt a strange mix of emotions. There was pride in how he and his fellow guardsmen had handled the situation with professionalism and restraint, but there was also frustration at Alex for their disrespect, yes, but more so at the growing trend of people treating sacred traditions as mere spectacles for entertainment. He sighed inwardly, reminding himself that not everyone understood the significance of what they represented. It wasn't his job to change their minds. It was his duty to stand firm regardless. Nearby, Captain Hayes addressed the lingering crowd of tourists, many of whom were still buzzing about what they had witnessed. "What happened here today is unacceptable," Hayes declared, his voice carrying authority without raising its tone. "These uniforms, this monument, and everything we protect, they are symbols of history, discipline, and respect. Disrupting them does not just affect us. It disrespects everyone who values these principles." His words resonated deeply with some listeners, while others simply nodded along, eager to move on from the drama of the afternoon. Meanwhile, Alex sat slumped on a bench near the edge of the square, flanked by local authorities who had taken over the situation. Their earlier bravado was gone, replaced by a mixture of shame and exhaustion. They stared blankly at the ground, avoiding eye contact with anyone passing by. The fine they had been issued wasn't crippling, but it stung, both financially and emotionally. More painful, though, was the knowledge that their actions would be remembered long after they left the city. Pictures and videos of their stunt were already circulating online, drawing ridicule and criticism from strangers around the world. For someone seeking attention, Alex had certainly gotten it, but not in the way they had hoped. As the officers prepared to escort Alex away, one of them leaned in slightly, offering a piece of advice. "Sometimes, mistakes teach us things we didn't know we needed to learn," he said quietly. "Take this as a chance to grow." Alex swallowed hard, nodding silently. Whether or not those words would stick remained to be seen, but for now, they offered a small glimmer of hope amidst the embarrassment. Back at the barracks later that evening, Marcus carefully inspected his hat under the soft glow of a desk lamp. He ran his fingers gently over the fur, smoothing out any remaining imperfections. Though it was just an object, it meant something to him, something far greater than its physical form. As he placed it back on its stand, he allowed himself a rare moment of vulnerability, reflecting on the balance between tradition and modernity. How could they preserve the dignity of their roles without alienating those who failed to understand them? It was a question he didn't have an answer to, but one he knew was worth pondering. For Alex, the night passed in restless contemplation. Alone in their hotel room, they scrolled through social media, wincing at the comments flooding in beneath posts about their antics. Some called them reckless, others labeled them disrespectful, and a few even defended them, calling the incident harmless fun. But none of it brought comfort. Instead, Alex found themselves replaying moments from the day, the thrill of the theft, the panic of the chase, the humiliation of being caught. Each memory served as a reminder of how quickly excitement could turn into regret. By morning, the square had returned to its usual rhythm. Tourists snapped photos of the monument. Children chased pigeons across the cobblestones, and guardsmen stood watchful and proud. Life moved forward, as it always did. But the echoes of the previous day lingered. A cautionary tale whispered among visitors, and a quiet resolve shared by those tasked with upholding order. For Marcus and his colleagues, it reinforced their commitment to their duties. And for Alex, it became a lesson etched into memory, a reminder that even the smallest acts of defiance can carry lasting consequences. The narrow alleyway seemed like a lifeline to Alex as they ducked into its shadowy confines, their chest heaving from the relentless sprint. For a fleeting moment, they thought they might actually escape. The towering walls on either side blocked out much of the sunlight, creating an eerie yet strangely comforting sense of isolation. But that relief was short-lived. As Alex glanced behind them, their hearts sank. They weren't alone. James and Oliver emerged at the entrance of the alley, their figures framed by the bright lights spilling in from the square. They moved with purpose, their boots echoing ominously against the cobblestones. Alex froze for a split second, panic bubbling up inside them. This wasn't part of the plan. There was no cheering crowd here, no friends to egg them on, just the cold reality of being cornered. Alex pressed forward, hoping to find another way out. But the alley ended abruptly, blocked by a tall iron gate that refused to budge no matter how hard they pushed or rattled it. Trapped between the immovable barrier and the advancing guardsmen, Alex spun around, clutching the bearskin hat tightly as if it could somehow shield them from what was coming next. "You're not going anywhere," James said firmly, his voice calm but commanding. He and Oliver spread out slightly, cutting off any chance of escape. Their movements were deliberate, calculated, not aggressive, but undeniably authoritative. Tourists who had followed the chase began gathering at the mouth of the alley, craning their necks to see what would happen next. Some whispered among themselves, others held up phones to record the confrontation, while a few simply watched in stunned silence. Alex tried to put on a brave face, though their earlier bravado was crumbling under the weight of the situation. "It's just a hat," they blurted out defensively, their voice trembling. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" "It's not just a hat," Oliver replied, his tone sharp but controlled. "It represents something bigger than you seem to understand. Now hand it over." For a moment, Alex hesitated, torn between defiance and surrender. Part of them wanted to keep fighting, to cling to the last shred of rebellion they had left. But the other part, the part that was rapidly realizing how deep they were in, knew there was no winning this fight. Still, they couldn't bring themselves to comply immediately. Instead, they clutched the hat tighter, glaring back at the guardsmen as if daring them to make the next move. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Neither side budged, locked in a silent standoff. Alex's mind raced, searching for some way out of this mess. Could they negotiate, stall for time? Or maybe, just maybe, they could still turn this into some kind of victory, even if it meant playing the victim later. But James and Oliver weren't about to let this drag on. With a shared glance, they communicated silently, deciding it was time to take control of the situation. James stepped forward, his presence imposing despite his measured movements. "We're done waiting," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Alex flinched, taking a step back until their back hit the unyielding gate. They looked from one guardsman to the other, their options dwindling to nothing. Finally, reluctantly, they held out the hat, but not before tossing it onto the ground in a final act of defiance. It landed with a dull thud, the once pristine fur now scuffed and dusty from its rough treatment. Oliver frowned deeply, shaking his head in disgust. "That's disrespectful," he muttered, glancing at James. Without hesitation, James bent down to retrieve the hat, brushing off the dirt as best he could. Meanwhile, Oliver kept his focus squarely on Alex, ensuring they didn't try anything else foolish. The crowd outside the alley murmured among themselves, some nodding approvingly at the guardsman's professionalism, others tutting at Alex's antics. Someone shouted, "You got what you deserved," while another called out, "Leave them alone. It's just a prank." Opinions were divided, but one thing was clear: everyone was watching. As James straightened up, holding the slightly damaged but still intact hat, he turned his attention back to Alex. "You've caused enough trouble for one day," he said evenly. "Let's go." And with that, the guardsman closed the distance, guiding Alex toward the opening of the alley. The crowd parted to let them pass, a mix of curiosity and judgment etched on every face. For Alex, the realization hit hard. They weren't getting away this time. Whatever happened next, they knew they'd have to face the consequences of their actions, and possibly learn a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. The days following the infamous hat-grabbing incident brought a wave of attention that rippled far beyond the city square. News outlets picked up the story, turning it into a topic of discussion not just locally, but internationally. Headlines like, "Tourists prank backfires against guardsmen," and "When tradition meets chaos." A lesson in respect dominated social media feeds and morning talk shows. People weighed in passionately, their opinions divided. Some viewed Alex's actions as harmless fun gone awry, while others saw them as a blatant disregard for authority and tradition. The debate sparked conversations about respect, personal responsibility, and the fine line between humor and disrespect. For Marcus and his fellow guardsmen, life returned to its usual rhythm, or as close to normal as possible after such an unusual event. They continued their duties with unwavering dedication, standing tall at their posts despite the occasional curious glances from tourists hoping to catch a glimpse of the now famous guardsman. To Marcus, the renewed attention was both flattering and frustrating. He appreciated the public support for his role, but he also knew that the uniform wasn't meant to be a spectacle. It was a symbol of discipline, history, and service. Still, he carried himself with the same quiet dignity that had defined him long before the incident occurred. Captain Hayes, meanwhile, used the incident as an opportunity to reinforce the importance of their work. During a routine meeting with his team, he reminded them of the significance of their presence in the square. "We are more than just figures in uniforms," he said, addressing the room with his characteristic calm but firm tone. "We represent values that some people may not fully understand, but our job is to uphold those values regardless. Yesterday proved that we can handle challenges without compromising who we are." His words resonated deeply with the guardsmen, reaffirming their sense of purpose. As for Alex, the aftermath of their stunt lingered like a shadow they couldn't shake. Back home, they tried to put the incident behind them, but reminders were everywhere. Friends and acquaintances teased them relentlessly, some poking fun at their misadventure, while others questioned why they'd taken things so far. Online, comment sections under videos of the chase lit up with criticism. Strangers dissected every detail of Alex's behavior, labeling them everything from reckless to disrespectful. For someone who had initially sought attention, the sudden spotlight felt suffocating. But it wasn't all negativity. Amidst the harsh judgments, there were moments of reflection. One commenter wrote, "Maybe this person didn't realize what they were doing wrong until it was too late. Everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes." Another added, "This could have been anyone. Let's use it as a reminder to think twice before acting impulsively." These voices stood out to Alex, offering a small measure of comfort during a difficult time. Slowly, they began to see the incident not just as a source of shame, but as a lesson, one they hoped would shape their decisions moving forward. In quieter moments, Alex thought about Marcus and the other guardsmen. They imagined the years of training and sacrifice required to wear that uniform, the weight of representing something larger than oneself. It made them wonder how many times people like Marcus endured similar disruptions without complaint, simply because it was part of their duty. The realization hit hard. They hadn't just disrespected a single individual. They had mocked an entire institution built on honor and sacrifice. Weeks later, Alex decided to write a short post online, addressing the incident publicly for the first time. In it, they admitted fault, acknowledging that their actions had been selfish and thoughtless. "I never meant to hurt anyone or disrespect what those guardsmen stand for," they wrote. "What I did was wrong, and I'm truly sorry. I hope this experience helps others think twice before making the same mistake I did." The post received mixed reactions. Some praised Alex for owning up to their error, while others dismissed it as too little, too late. But for Alex, it was a step toward redemption, however small. Meanwhile, the square itself seemed untouched by the drama, continuing to welcome visitors with open arms. Tourists marveled at the grandeur of the monument, unaware of the recent turmoil unless someone pointed it out. Guardsmen stood vigilant, their presence unchanged by the events of the past week. And though the incident had faded from daily conversation, its lessons remained etched in the memories of those involved. A reminder that even the smallest choices carry consequences, and that respect is earned through understanding, not mockery. For Marcus, the hat sat proudly back on its stand, a little scuffed but still standing strong, much like the traditions it represented. The moment the news of the stolen hat reached Captain Hayes, the atmosphere shifted. The usually calm and composed officer stood near the edge of the square, observing the scene unfold with a mix of disbelief and rising frustration. He had seen his fair share of odd incidents during his time overseeing the guardsmen. Tourists taking selfies too close to the posts, children innocently tugging at uniforms, and even the occasional loud complaint about restricted areas. But nothing quite like this. A blatant theft in broad daylight. It was unheard of. Hayes clenched his jaw as he listened to the report from a nearby guard who had witnessed the chaos firsthand. They just snatched it right off his head. "Sir," the guard explained, still looking shaken. Didn't even hesitate. Hayes exhaled sharply, his mind racing. This wasn't just about a hat. It was about respect for the uniform, for the institution, and for the values they represented. Allowing such behavior to go unchecked would set a dangerous precedent. Without wasting another second, Hayes turned to two of his most trusted guardsmen, James and Oliver, who were stationed nearby. Both men snapped to attention immediately, their expressions sharp and focused. "Find the perpetrator," Hayes instructed, his voice firm but controlled. "Retrieve the hat and ensure no further disruptions occur." His tone left no room for misunderstanding. The situation needed to be resolved swiftly and decisively. James and Olivia exchanged a quick glance before nodding in unison. They didn't need to speak to know what was expected of them. With practiced efficiency, they began weaving through the crowd, their eyes scanning for any sign of Alex or the distinctive bearskin hat. Though dressed in full ceremonial regalia, their movements were surprisingly agile, cutting through the throng of tourists with ease. People instinctively stepped aside as the guardsmen approached, sensing the urgency in their strides. Meanwhile, Alex continued their chaotic dash, oblivious to the fact that reinforcements were now on their trail. Still clutching the hat, they darted around corners and ducked behind groups of people, trying to lose themselves in the sea of faces. But the thrill of the chase was beginning to wear thin. Every shout from the crowd, every flash of movement out of the corner of their eye, made their heart race faster. Were they being followed? Was someone closing in? Their friends, who had initially cheered them on, were starting to lag behind, their enthusiasm fading into concern. "Maybe you should give it back," one of them suggested nervously, glancing over their shoulder. Another chimed in, "Yeah, this isn't funny anymore. What if they arrest you?" Alex waved them off dismissively, unwilling to admit defeat. "Relax," they said, though their voice betrayed a hint of unease. "I've got this under control." Unbeknownst to Alex, James and Oliver were steadily narrowing the gap. The two guardsmen communicated silently, using subtle gestures to coordinate their pursuit. James took the lead, moving ahead to cut off potential escape routes, while Oliver hung back slightly, ready to intercept if Alex doubled back. Their teamwork was seamless, born from years of training and shared experience. To an outside observer, they might have appeared statuesque and rigid, but in motion, they were anything but. As the chase carried on, whispers spread among the crowd like wildfire. Tourists eagerly recounted the events to newcomers, embellishing details and speculating about what would happen next. Some recorded videos, hoping to capture the climactic moment when the guardsmen finally caught up to the thief. Others simply watched, captivated by the drama unfolding before their eyes. The once quiet square had transformed into a stage, with everyone playing their part, whether as participant, spectator, or unwitting accomplice. For Alex, the weight of the situation began to sink in. The hat, which had seemed so exciting moments ago, now felt like a liability. Each step became heavier, not just because of the physical burden of carrying it, but because of the growing realization that they were running out of options. The narrow streets surrounding the square offered fewer hiding spots, and the crowd was thinning as they moved farther away from the main attraction. Still, Alex refused to slow down. They spotted a narrow alleyway up ahead and veered toward it, thinking it might provide a shortcut, or at least a temporary refuge. As they disappeared into the shadows of the alley, they allowed themselves a brief moment of relief. But unknown to them, James and Oliver were already closing in, their determination unwavering. The game of cat and mouse was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. As Alex stood there, surrounded by the stern faces of James and Oliver, it became painfully clear that their reckless prank had spiraled far beyond anything they'd anticipated. The thrill of the chase, the adrenaline rush of defiance, it all felt like a distant memory now, replaced by a sinking feeling of regret and embarrassment. They glanced at the hat in James's hands, its once pristine surface now scuffed and dusty from being tossed onto the ground. For the first time, Alex allowed themselves to consider the weight of what they had done, not just to the guardsmen, but to the tradition and respect the uniform represented. James stepped forward, his expression unreadable but undeniably serious. "You've made your point," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Now it's our turn." Before Alex could respond, or even fully process what those words meant, Oliver moved closer, flanking them on the other side. Together, the two guardsmen closed in, their disciplined demeanor leaving no room for resistance. What happened next was swift and decisive, yet measured. Using their training, James and Oliver subdued Alex with practiced precision. There were no raised voices, no unnecessary displays of aggression, just a series of calculated actions designed to neutralize the situation without causing harm. Alex found themselves pinned against the alley wall, their arms gently but firmly restrained. It wasn't painful, but it was enough to make it clear that further defiance would be futile. The crowd outside the alley watched in stunned silence, some nodding approvingly while others whispered among themselves. A few even clapped quietly, as if relieved to see justice being served. Someone muttered, "Serves them right," while another added, "They should have known better." Social media buzzed with updates as tourists who had recorded the incident began posting videos online, capturing every moment of the dramatic showdown. For Alex, the experience was humbling. Their earlier bravado evaporated completely, replaced by wide-eyed shock and shame. As they stood there, held firmly in place by the guardsmen, they couldn't help but reflect on how quickly things had escalated. What had started as a silly prank, a momentary lapse in judgment, had turned into something much bigger. They hadn't considered the impact of their actions on Marcus, the guardsmen, or the countless people visiting the square to admire its history and traditions. Now, faced with the consequences, they realized just how selfish and thoughtless their behavior had been. James and Oliver exchanged a glance, silently deciding that the lesson was complete. With a final warning, they released Alex, though not entirely letting them off the hook. "This isn't over," Oliver said, his tone firm but not unkind. "You'll have to answer to the authorities for this." He gestured toward the growing group of onlookers and officials who were now approaching the scene, including Captain Hayes, whose stern presence commanded immediate attention. As the reality of the situation set in, Alex stammered out an apology, their voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to cause trouble," they said, looking down at their feet. I wasn't thinking." It was a weak attempt at justification, and everyone knew it, including Alex themselves. Still, the acknowledgement seemed to soften the mood slightly, if only because it showed a glimmer of remorse. Captain Hayes arrived moments later, surveying the scene with a critical eye. He listened as James briefly explained what had transpired, then turned his gaze to Alex. His expression was neither angry nor sympathetic, just deeply disappointed. "Actions have consequences," he said simply, his words carrying the weight of authority and experience. "Today, you learned that lesson. Let's hope it sticks." Local law enforcement officers soon joined the group, taking charge of the situation. They questioned Alex briefly, noting their details before issuing a formal warning, and a hefty fine for disrupting public order and damaging property. To add insult to injury, Alex was also banned from returning to the square, ensuring they wouldn't repeat the same mistake twice. By the time the ordeal was over, Alex looked utterly defeated. Their earlier bravado was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. As they walked away, escorted by the officers, they couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching them, judging them. The hat, now cradled carefully in James's hands, symbolized everything they had disrespected and ultimately failed to conquer. For the guardsmen, however, life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such an unusual incident. James and Oliver exchanged a brief nod of satisfaction before heading back to their posts, their duty fulfilled. Meanwhile, Marcus greeted them with a small, almost imperceptible smile, grateful for their efforts in restoring order. Though the day had been chaotic, it ended with a reminder that even in moments of